Quick heads up to regular listeners of the Marketing Gateway. We'd planned and even promoted an interview episode today, and technology got in our way and ate half the interview. Unfortunately, it was the half where I wasn't talking, so we're working on getting that restored so you can see our guest. Until then, here's a fresh new episode for today. So as you might recall, I'm often bewildered by Microsoft, a company that is so large that they can afford to make a lot of mistakes when it comes to branding. Mainly because they're essentially a legal monopoly and there aren't any serious alternatives for a computer operating system for businesses and desktop consumer users to switch to if they're unhappy with Microsoft. I mean, yeah, there is Apple's Mac OS and iOS, and then there's Google's Android and Chrome OS, and then there's even Linux. But anyhow, 71% market share on desktop computers is what I'm really talking about here, and nobody's really threatening that right now. Along with basically owning the desktop computer market, Microsoft has over 400 million paid subscriptions to its productivity software suite, popularly known as Microsoft Office. Now, I use Microsoft Word, which is part of that suite, to write this episode. And if you're in the corporate world, I'm sure you've used Word or PowerPoint or Excel or one of their other traditional Microsoft Office products too. Believe it or not, Microsoft is in second place in the global office software market with 30% market share compared to about 44% that Google has. So Google has them beat with Google Workspace. But Microsoft's been pushing really hard on its generative AI suite of software, formerly known as Bing Chat, but now known as Copilot. They've invested over $80 billion into their AI platform, and an October 2025 report they commissioned through Forrester suggests that small or mid-sized businesses who use Copilot for projects can see an ROI ranging from 132% to a staggering 353% over a 3-year period. Now, being a small business owner myself, I'm pretty skeptical of that. But that's why they're pushing this Copilot stuff so hard. They're hoping that businesses will bite because 3.7 million businesses currently use Microsoft 365. Or do they? Because there's some news going around that Microsoft Office is no more. And in fact, if you go to www.office.com today, you'll be greeted by a screen that says, "Welcome to the Microsoft 365 Copilot app." And there's a line on the page that says, "The Microsoft 365 Copilot app, formerly Office, lets you create, share, and collaborate all in one place with your favorite apps, now including Copilot." And so the word on the street is that it looks like Microsoft is rolling out a rebranding of its entire Office product portfolio to not just be integrated with Copilot, it's now being called Copilot. But why would Microsoft do something so obviously stupid as to rebrand their historic Microsoft Office suite of products to something far more confusing and less palatable to consumers? Well, the answer is, it actually happened back in 2020 when they renamed the subscription version of their Office suite Microsoft 365. And then again in April of 2025 when they renamed the Microsoft 365 app Microsoft 365 Copilot. Nobody but tech enthusiasts and Wikipedia editors even seem to have noticed that, by the way. But the more complex answer is Microsoft really does want people to think about Copilot, and no matter what they call their productivity suite, the brand that they care about going forward is the one that's powered by AI. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. Okay, so let's back up to 2022 when Microsoft decided to rebrand their Office suite in the first place. Microsoft Office has been around for a long time, first debuting on Windows 3.0 in 1990, and going through several iterations before going through new version updates that more or less kept pace with the rollout of new operating system versions. Office 95 was for Windows 95. Office XP was for Windows XP, and the versions of Office that shipped roughly every 3 years from then on out were for the update packs for XP, Windows 7, and Windows 10. Sorry, Windows Vista, you don't get your own exclusive version of Office. Everybody else does, though. But hey, you know what? The Macintosh and iOS and Android all have their own versions. Well, anyway, while Office is not a terribly exciting product to talk about from a glitz and glamour point of view, The most evolutionary change in the suite in the 21st century was in Office 2007, where Microsoft ditched the traditional drop-down menus and icon bars you still see in other competing software like Google Workspace or LibreOffice. And then they replaced it with this graphical ribbon that's needlessly complex and which people really hated when it first launched. But, we've had about 20 years to get used to it. Up until the last 10 years or so, Office was generally sold as a standalone product. You go to the store, buy a boxed copy of the software, put the floppy disk or CD-ROM or DVD-ROM into your drive, and then install it with a license key so that it would be yours to keep forever. But Microsoft really wanted to turn Office into an annual subscription service as opposed to a piece of software that cheapskates could keep using until the heat death of the universe, and so they made a diverging product originally called Office Web Apps that launched in 2008 and went through many different name changes as Microsoft tried to figure out how to make it work online. The most recent name from 2014 to 2019 was Office Online, and it was part of a broader umbrella of services called Windows Live. But there was this other parallel product within Microsoft's portfolio called Office 365. It was launched in 2010 and mainly focused on the corporate market. And Microsoft, confusingly, had a different service geared at enterprise customers called Microsoft 365 that was introduced in 2017, and it bundled together the operating system, Office 365, and security features all in one place. So in spring of 2020, right at the beginning of the global pandemic, Microsoft decided to rebrand Office 365 as Microsoft 365, reserving the Office 365 brand for institutional and enterprise users. But then, in 2022, they announced that they were phasing out the Microsoft Office brand for everything except for legacy products, and that going forward, the entire suite would be called Microsoft 365. Except there's still a non-subscription version of the software called Microsoft Office 2024 that includes software like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and Outlook for a one-time purchase. Okay, is your head spinning yet? I've said it before, and I will say it again. Microsoft absolutely stinks at branding. They make things so needlessly confusing. But that brings us to their current controversy. The internet started buzzing on January 5th that on Microsoft's Office.com website, which remember, they haven't been using to market Microsoft Office 365 as a product since 2022, the site now appears to be suggesting that Microsoft 365 is being renamed the Microsoft 365 Copilot app. Now, unlike the hyperbole you might be seeing on the internet, Microsoft is not changing the brand name of Microsoft Office to Microsoft Copilot App 365 this year. That statement is factually incorrect. The truth is it happened gradually over the last 5 years, and no one even noticed. As I mentioned earlier, that change actually did take place last year in April when Microsoft decided to rename its Microsoft 365 app, and Copilot at the time was still a relatively new brand. It was adopted to replace the earlier name of Bing Chat in late 2023. And by the way, do you remember when Microsoft was trying to get us to Bing everything a few years ago? Good grief, Microsoft. Nobody wanted that. So anyway, then Microsoft started selling premium access to Copilot in January of 2024 and gradually integrated it into the Microsoft 365 software so that it became Microsoft 365 with Copilot. And Microsoft also launched a new version of Windows for certain hardware that runs Copilot in the background to optimize processes. And they've also since pivoted to making every Windows 11 PC include built-in integration with Copilot. Like I said, Microsoft stinks at branding. It's confusing to know what software you're buying and what you're running, but if you read their Windows Experience blog post from October of 2025, they really want you to use Copilot. They want you to interact with your PC by talking to Copilot the same way you might have talked to Siri or Google Assistant on your phone in years past. Or Cortana on Windows, but Windows got rid of that AI assistant in 2023 and replaced it with Copilot. Geez, Microsoft, you really love to confuse the heck out of people. So what we're ultimately heading towards is that Microsoft wants you to think about Windows 11 when you think operating system, Microsoft 365 when you think about buying subscription services, and Copilot when you think about sitting down to your computer and actually doing any work. Which means, effectively, they really have killed the Office brand in favor of Copilot. And, the real question that I have is why? So let's take a look at another tech company that competes with Microsoft, and that is Google. So about 10 years ago, there were all these panicked headlines that Google was changing its name to Alphabet Incorporated. And yes, that actually did happen. But what it really involved was a restructuring of the corporation so that Google and all of its other businesses would operate under a holding company. And this actually made a lot of sense because Google was invested in a lot of other ventures at the time, and they needed to reorganize so that multiple CEOs could run those businesses without Google being directly tied to them. So that rebranding happened, and Google is still operating as Google. And while Google has done a number of confusing and, let's be honest, outright stupid things over the last few years when it comes to branding, they aren't messing with their core products. Gmail is still Gmail, even when it's a part of Google Workspace. Google, the search engine, is still just called Google. And YouTube is still very much its own thing. And Gemini, their recent AI program, is being touted as its own platform, not as a replacement for Google so much as an augmentation of it. On the other hand, we saw Facebook go through a pretty silly rebrand when Mark Zuckerberg decided to reorganize under the name Meta. His big dream at the time was to build the metaverse, an online virtual reality platform that resembles the futuristic, highly personal, anything goes internet you commonly see in science fiction and cyberpunk stories. Meta has sunk around $50 billion into trying to make the metaverse a thing, launching several iterations in their VR headset line, putting out AI-powered Ray-Ban sunglasses, and pushing hard for people to use this silly VR platform called Horizon that even regular VR users like myself think is pretty stupid and pointless. Meta was an example of a terrible rebrand for a tech company, but it still didn't impact Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp too much. They all still operate under their successful brand names. Microsoft, on the other hand, has never really been a name that people have liked very much. It's always seemed too cold and too corporate. And back in the 1990s when I was a teenager, when Star Trek: The Next Generation was still a big deal, Microsoft was often humorously compared to the cybernetic hive mind known as the Borg, who traveled around the galaxy in ugly, giant mechanical cubes instead of sleekly designed starships. We are Microsoft. We will assimilate you. Copilot is also a really nebulous brand name because, it's essentially a front end for a variant of ChatGPT. And people know what ChatGPT is, but Copilot just kind of seems like the generic store brand version of it. That it's being integrated with boring old Office software doesn't make it sexy or interesting either. It makes it seem like the ribbon forced on users in Office 2007. You're going to have to learn to like it because it's really hard to operate the software without it. So yeah, Copilot is Microsoft's way of saying, you don't need Office anymore. Our AI assistant will take care of all that boring document creation and data analysis and deck building for you. You just need to sit down and tell it what to do. Now, as far as I can tell, the only people who want to do that are the people working at Microsoft. Most of us don't want to talk to our computers when we're working, and we sure as heck don't want Copilot messing up our work by trying to do things for us, but badly. I know I would rather spend a few hours writing a script for the Marketing Gateway than asking Copilot to do it and then spending all day fixing all of its many mistakes. No matter how loud the AI hype gets, the proof is in the results. AI tools are really lousy at producing useful, reliable output that goes beyond a very basic level of helpfulness, but are incredibly adept at churning out useless, soulless garbage. And Microsoft? You guys have more money than almost any entity in the world. Would it be such a terrible thing to just hire a marketing team that can settle on a few product names and then keep them that way? The rest of the world would love it if you could do that for us. Well, I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time. Today's plug is for being adaptable. We had to do it today when our plans for an episode fell through, and it's pretty much how I have to live my life every day, with teenagers in the house and cats waking me up at 2 in the morning to let me know that my toes suddenly look like exciting little toys that they'd love to play with. So I was listening to Margaret Atwood's book, The Penelope ad, recently, and Penelope is, of course, the clever wife of the ancient Greek hero Odysseus, and she has to outthink several situations she finds herself in while her husband's away. In Atwood's novel, Penelope is the daughter of a naiad, which is a water nymph, and her mother tells her this: water does not resist. Water flows. When you plunge your hand into it, all you feel is a caress. Water is not a solid wall. It will not stop you, but water always goes where it wants to go, and nothing in the end can stand against it. Water is patient. Dripping water wears away a stone. Remember that, my child. Remember you are half water. If you can't go through an obstacle, go around it. Water does. That's great advice. That's what being adaptable is. When the world puts you in a position where you have to change, it's much easier if you adapt and flow around the obstacle than to try to work against it. But I also like the idea that in being adaptable, we also have to be patient. And that's exactly where we are today, waiting for a technology platform to fix a problem so we can release the episode we intended to put out. And I'm hopeful that we'll have that for you tomorrow. In the meantime, though, we'll continue to be adaptable here at the Marketing Gateway. It's a far better way to live than being frustrated.